Hello, my name is Monica Lopez McGee, pronouns she, hers, joining you from Austin, Texas, indigenous land of the Tonkawa, Comanche, and Humanos. I'm so pleased to be with you today, along with my colleague, Jamie Zappletosh, sharing about the value of outdoor learning, examples of outdoor learning we are seeing around the US, and also ideas to bring outdoor learning to your community or campus. This is not a new topic, but it is definitely timely. As the Director of Cities and Community Engagement for the Children in Nature Network, I help city and community leaders develop programs, policies, and partnerships to provide children and families access to nature and the many health and academic benefits it provides. I come to you with more than a decade of experience facilitating youth programs and teacher trainings, from rooftop school gardens in New York City to a residential outdoor education center in rural Texas, and also starting my own family nature club for me and my family to meet up with friends and other family members to hike and camp and paddle and just be in community together outdoors.
And I am Jamie Zappletosh. I'm the Director of Green Schoolyards for Healthy Communities with the Children in Nature Network. And I am speaking with you from the lands of the Potawatomi, the Peoria, the Kickapoo, Miami, and Sioux tribes. And my background and experience has been working in city government, in a public school setting, as well as in conservation nonprofits. And all of that work has focused on school gardening, teacher professional development, and green schoolyards program development and partnership building, funding mechanisms, and all of that. And that's been Chicago and across the country now with my role, the Children in Nature Network. And I am also a parent of a nature girl. So over the last several generations, childhood has moved indoors. And while so much is technologically advancing, we're seeing a huge rise in what researchers are calling deaths of despair, or deaths by suicide, deaths by alcohol and drug abuse. And depression and anxiety is rising among all age levels, but particularly concerning is the increase in young children. The National Institute of Health reports that just over 20%, or 1 in 5 of US children, either currently or at some point in their life had a seriously debilitating mental disorder. And that's pre-COVID. So I'm sure that all of us would say that that number has to be higher now. I know I think all of us are experiencing the ups and downs on a daily basis of what life in a pandemic can be. And as a mother of an 11-year-old daughter, I'm concerned about what her life is going to be like. And I'm concerned about this whole generation growing up in this environment, and also what that impact is for our entire country. And while we know it's not a panacea, nature does have the ability to mitigate many of the issues affecting children in their mental health and well-being. The Children in Nature Network is a 13-year-old organization that provides resources, research, and knowledge so that all kids have access to the benefits of nature where they live, work, and play.
Absolutely. And one of those resources is infographics like this that you see, and they're summarized, peer-reviewed, published literature that is used to help you make the case for your peers, city officials, administrators, etc. And so captured in this specific infographic it documents nature's power to improve health and well-being, including physical activity. We know this intuitively. When children are outdoors, they move more. I can be out there with my son, I move more. You've probably experienced that on your own. Nature has also proven to reduce stress, anger, and aggression. You've ever walked outside and simply felt your shoulders relax. In those moments, you know exactly what I'm talking about, that stress reduction. It doesn't stop there, though. The research also shows that kids are not only healthier and happier, but also smarter. So connecting children with nature promotes their cognitive development and learning. So learning in nature, in outdoor settings, promotes better academic performance. So we can not only talk about this as a nice to have, but a must have. So we see this green schoolyards and green neighborhoods around schools are linked to higher test scores, attention restoration, and improved school attendance. There's no better case making for the value of the outdoors. And we see that people are gravitating to the outdoors, like in this pandemic, to seek that solitude and restoration that we know it provides. So this diagram from the CDC really reminds us that when we go outdoor, provide outdoor spaces, that we have the opportunity for social distancing. And when we couple that with masks, we create this sweet spot in the middle that is the space for outdoor learning. This was done effectively in history, in 1907, when classes were held on open rooftops and ferries during the plague of the tuberculosis. Jamie, you've been an in-class teacher. What do you see as some of the biggest benefits around outdoor learning at this time?
Well, I think to my opening remarks about the power of nature, I really think that my biggest concern is supporting the traumatic effects of what the pandemic has been doing to all of us. So teachers and students and all school staff, community members, in everybody's struggling. And thinking about being able to use the outdoors for learning is just an amazing concept. I know my daughter's school has actually been able to do that, where half of their time is outside, and she's for sure seeing those benefits. The biggest challenge with moving learning outside, though, I think, is, and we'll get to a couple more things to think about, but it's really the teacher's comfort level around teaching outside. When you're really moving the four walls away and the desks, and you're moving outside to do learning and teaching, it's a really different feeling, and classroom management looks really different. And that's where, environmental education orgs or other nonprofits that have been doing this work for so long can really come in and be partners with schools through training, modeling, and potentially even actual facilitation in the outdoor classroom setting. And I really think that developing partnerships around teaching outside is critical right now. So thinking about, what organizations or what schools you can support together to move classes outdoors for all of the reasons that we've talked about so far, but really just be able to access teaching and learning outside. In addition, so teaching and learning outside can support community cohesion, really support stress reduction in students and teachers, and their stress responses. And so again, we know really that this is PTSD that students are going through right now. We know that there's a lot of schools even doing extended recess time that are for the schools that are back in session because of how much the students are going through. And so it's a great way to support kids and teachers where they're at right now.
Absolutely, Jamie. And you mentioned teachers. And so teachers are looking for these ways to get outside, but they don't always feel equipped. And yet we have an entire environmental education community and programs out there who have halted programming during the pandemic and are looking for ways to still support the community and to have more children outdoors. Some of them are opting for virtual learning opportunities, which are definitely an option. And there's a unique opportunity here for those environmental educators to pair with teachers to support them in what they need. And so how we think of this in a new way, because we know that there are a lot of demands on teachers. And so how do we take all that rich knowledge of the outdoor community of facilitating classes outdoors and bring that to teachers? Because we know that the outdoor learning or learning outdoors can also be simply outdoor learning. And I say that because a common view of outdoor learning is that youth are learning about the outdoors. And that is definitely what we see. Watersheds, habitats, and critters. We want to foster that. And this is wonderful. And the benefits of nature are experienced outdoors regardless of the topic. So these outdoor experiences, when they're outdoors, they foster a love of the outdoors, which ultimately leads to an environmental ethos, which is what much of what oftentimes environmental educators are trying to cultivate. So we can do that in outdoor educators, environmental educators can do that in tangent with teachers while supporting their needs. So talking a little, this shares a little bit about that outdoor community. Jamie, what does it look like from a school perspective?
Yeah, so I didn't quite mention this in my introduction, but in my current role, I've been supporting school districts and cities across the country in creating their green schoolyard programs. And in non-COVID times, there's still the need for teacher support and professional development around teaching outdoors, like I was talking about earlier, but specifically now. Um, Teaching outdoors sounds like a great idea, but schools are having a hard time making that transition. Classroom management looks different. And again, the opportunities for environmental educators to really partner with schools to support the training, the mentoring, the modeling, or actual facilitation of learning outside is really a critical component of what can be offered right now. And like Monica was saying earlier, pretty much anything can be taught outside. When I talked about my daughter's school earlier, they're out there doing their writing, they're doing different lesson examples, just literally because there's more space. It's not that they're using the physical outdoors for it, they're just using it as a backdrop so that they can have more than a couple of students together with a teacher at a time. So thinking about that transition of how to support, I would say starting with a pilot, starting small is really going to be key in making that transition. My daughter's school is a singular school, so it doesn't have a whole district to contend with policies, and we'll get into a little bit of that as well. But really thinking about how do you just try a few schools or try a few classes outdoors first to just kind of get the feel for how that looks and prove success first before trying to commit everybody to be outside all the time if you haven't been, if that hasn't been part of the way a school has been operating. People are also thinking that this is a really expensive endeavor. They're thinking amphitheaters or big outdoor classroom areas where everybody is underneath a permanent structure to provide shade. And seating and shade is important, but there's a lot of temporary ways to deal with that. You can use straw bales, and you can use like blankets actually just for seating outside. It doesn't have to be all that much. A lot of schools are trying pop-up tents to provide shade. And so just thinking about not going full on with infrastructure is going to be really important. And again, thinking about how to support teachers to move their classes outdoors, if there's the ability to provide some professional development with teachers, that's ideal. And some schools don't have outdoor spaces. They really are going to need to look at nearby parks or other open spaces to be able to learn outdoors. And so again, it might not be super natureful, but you're still going to get the benefits of being outside. One of the things that, I talked about recess earlier. I just talked with a colleague a couple of weeks ago from El Cajon, California, and the park district there actually was asked by the superintendent of their school district to partner at every single school to provide full day physical activities for their students. So they're playing this role again of not making sure all kids are at school because they are going full day in session in person, but also it doesn't have to be all about learning about the habitats outside while you're there.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned, that partnership that the school districts is forming, the schools are forming with their city partners. And so just as you said, the importance of starting small, also that many cities have been doing this for quite a while. and forming partnerships between community-based organizations and their municipalities, and municipalities working with their school districts. So also thinking strategically of how you start small, but also how you advocate for the work, to build those partnerships and relationships that can support you in bigger ways. And some of the things that we see are cities really looking at those assets and saying, you know, where does this exist, in addition to our schools, parks, libraries, local outdoor organizations that can support, where we can combine resources to provide what's best for our kids, right? And in our current situation, here in Austin, where I'm at, Austin adopted a green schoolyard strategy, a really intentional approach to building municipal and a partnership with the municipality, the city of Austin, and the school district. And then that school district is also forming partnership with community-based organizations. Here we see Pease Elementary School, which is the city forming MOUs, agreements with local community-based organizations, where then those organizations come into the school to facilitate programming. So really bringing in the strength of each of those different partners to support them. And then in Albuquerque, where the city of Albuquerque is partnering with Albuquerque Public Schools to coordinate campus greening efforts. And one of the ways they're doing it, you talked about infrastructure, is they're creating 2 prototypes of nature play sites for schools and even their neighboring parks. So they're not doing it in isolation. And so when they build out these prototypes, then they can quickly approve them and have them install. So how we're advocating for those type of partnerships and supporting them so that we can do some of those immediate term solutions and also go building pathways for long term. And then we know that sometimes when we're facilitating programming outdoors, that it might be too cold, too hot, or, you know, what are the circumstances? Well, the city of Leadville, their Get Outdoors Leadville program, it's this tiny mountain town in Colorado. They have a gear library to distribute appropriate attire. And they're now partnering with the schools during this pandemic to say, how can we support you so that those students have the gear necessary to produce and conduct outdoor classrooms, including setting up fire pits outdoors, because it's a record snowfall in that area and cold temperatures. So as we look out, we look at the lens of like, how do we solve for this? How do we move forward and support what is needed, whether that's at the advocating level or as simple as gear, and making sure that everybody has what they need. But these are the only examples happening around our community.
Yeah, and so I want to go back to Austin. They've been working with both of us for a while, and I know you're an Austin native. Well, at least you are in Austin now. But it's been really amazing to see the outdoor learning initiatives and the Green School Parks program really move into systemic change. They were able to build off all of these existing partnerships in an existing program to create standard operating procedures for outdoor learning during COVID. And that's really amazing. The school board approved this. School staff actually developed it, and the school board approved it. And part of their return to school at Austin Independent School District, part of the return to school in-person learning plan recommends outdoor learning. And so this is a snapshot of what some of the protocol look like. And it includes, as you can see, a checklist of like, what are the things you should be thinking about? And like your gear library, Monica, there's also like, okay, what are the everyday things that every student needs, especially if we're trying not to, cross-contaminate and touch multiple things. Does each student have certainly sanitizer, but also their learning materials and equipment for being outside. And this is the front page of a 3-page document that kind of supports schools and teachers in meeting both CDC guidelines and thinking through the basics of what moving outside looks like. Then we have in Baltimore, they've also actually outside of COVID, we're really supporting outdoor learning, and it's going to a completely new level now. They created this outdoor learning at city schools guidebook, and it includes also, back to piloting, and maybe if we can switch to the next slide, thank you, showing temporary infrastructure, so it doesn't all have to be permanent. One of the things that they're doing in Baltimore is using existing grant dollars to help support their piloting of the program. So schools are applying and getting, small grants, $2,500, $3,000 grants, just to help them build out these materials so that they can get outside. And this is a great, go ahead, the last slide's great. So this shows you, what things overlap with their other priorities in the district as well. And lastly, Providence is doing something similar, where they're getting they're really promoting learning outside as part of their health and wellness policy outside of pre-COVID times, let alone now. And then if you could forward one more slide as well. So the Children in Nature Network has been supporting, along with probably 200 other organizations across the country, this national COVID-19 outdoor learning initiative. Most of you are hopefully aware of this by now, but it really is going to be publishing in a short amount of time an online guidebook of how to tackle all of these things that Monica and I have covered. And it's really an exciting collective impact, shared knowledge resource of how to set up classes so that you can bring multiple classes out at the same time, what those temporary structures might look like, what are different arrangements, how do you talk to your park agency if you don't have any property on your own school district, own school grounds, but really need to get off site, and what are the things you need to think about, liability agreements, all of that. There's just so much good stuff that's going on right now.
There is so much good stuff, and there's a lot of resources. Jamie, you've pulled up a few here as reference. We've mentioned the infographics. So looking at those resources that exist outside your community and using some of these, and then also looking in your community. What are your assets in the community? Who are potential partners that maybe you haven't considered before? And how does that play into supporting and making sure that children have that opportunity to go outdoors? It's our only way to move this further is through partnerships, and really finding those shared goals in partnership, knowing that everybody is transitioning right now creates a unique opportunity for us to focus on our common goals of keeping kids safe during COVID, while also helping to build mental and physical health and resilience, which we really need long term, while supporting learning. And then, as we noted, reducing that stress and giving, at the end of the day, just giving kids and teachers an outdoor break, literally.
And so in final summary, while we're hoping that this is helpful for all of you in thinking about how to get your kids outside to learn now during the pandemic, we're also really hoping that that this comfort level and this current need to do that, it becomes a long-term change in the way we look at education and we think about schooling, is that the outdoors are truly considered part of the school and an extension of the classroom, because as we've covered, and we've got a lot more resources that we've created over time, there are so many benefits for getting kids outside and learning outside that we can't understate. And this is hopefully the beginning of a big change in the way we look at education. So thanks for joining me today, Monica.
Oh, likewise. And we can direct people to childreninnature.org for additional resources that Jamie and I mentioned here.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.